So, welcome to the first RPIC e-learning event. Bienvenue au premier événement virtuel de l'IBIC. On a encore des personnes qui rentrent dans la salle virtuelle. We're going to give them 2 more minutes to keep you busy for the first 2 minutes. We'll get you started with a poll. We'll see you in 2 minutes. All right, 102. I'd like to be able to see everyone kind of settling in, but we're a webinar, so I can't see you. But so, welcome to RPIC. Bienvenue à l'IBIC. My name is Michael Nolan, and I'm the Vice President of Professional Development here at RPIC. The pandemic has thrown us all a curveball, and we're all adapting. Today's session is the first of many e-learning products that RPIC will be bringing to the community. I'll tell you a bit about them before we say goodbye at the end of today's session. Webinar logistics. I've got to say, the timing of today's event is pretty good. Thank you to PSPC for sending out their COVID-19 guide just before this event. It's perfect timing. I like the way that it highlights the fact that the real property community is going to be playing a key role in getting the largest portfolio of this country's corporate real estate up and running and safe. Today's logistics, it's a little different from an in-person event, so we don't need to show you where the exits are or where the washrooms are. You got all that covered. Today's session, it is being recorded. You'll find it on our website by July 17th, hopefully before then. And also note that RPIC's vision for these events is never just to have a one-way conversation and to present information to you. It's meant to spark conversations. You've had these conversations at our event before, but it's a little harder to do in these online events. So in the spirit of sparking that conversation and encouraging that ongoing conversation, we're going to be sharing a participant list with you next week. If you do not want your name included on that participant list, please contact our registrar, Rosa, via Eventbrite in the invitation that was sent to you. The Zoom platform, we're quite happy with it. It's quite intuitive, but if you do run into any issues, at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat function. Abby and Shoshana will be there to help you out and try to get your technical issues sorted out. Questions, we'll be taking those at the end. And Abby and Shoshana will be monitoring your questions, which should be, I don't know if I'm mirrored here, but either on the left or on the right-hand side of your screen. So they'll be monitoring questions and passing those over to Wayne, and we'll address those at the end of the session. A short note on video conferencing. Treasury Board Secretariat has cleared departments to use video conferencing. Not all departments will. Every department has their own needs. So I do want to acknowledge all the RCMP and D&D folks out in virtual land that are using their personal devices. Thank you very much for joining us today. Today's session is going to be running for about an hour. I'm shortly going to be passing things on to Wayne. Wayne and our guests will be on center stage for 30 to 45 minutes, and then we'll be getting to your questions. So, our moderator, Wayne. Wayne's an RPIC board member and managing partner at Horizon. Wayne has 30+ years of experience in designing technology and database solutions for clients across North America, including 25 Canadian federal government departments. And Horizon is an Ottawa-based global leader in real property and facilities management industry. And so before I let Wayne take it away, just make sure to ask Siri and Alexa to check out From the Ashes of COVID-19, the Modern Government Office for some of Wayne's insights. Without further ado, Wayne, thanks for leading today's discussion.
Thank you, Michael. Bienvenue à tout le monde. I'm glad to be here today and to help moderate some good conversation. I think the intent of the presentation today is to really, plant some seeds around the different ideas. So I'm going to start by introducing our panelists. I'll have a couple of things to talk about. We'll actually launch another poll that I think is kind of an interesting question to ask everybody. And then we'll dive right into the presentation. So without further ado, I'll do a quick introduction here for Matthew, who's with the House of Commons. Matthew has extensive experience in the commercial corporate real estate, both in Canada and the UK. He's formally trained in interior design, also has a master's in real estate development. He currently works with the FM group at the House of Commons and is very much in charge of a lot of the standards and guidelines development, and also with the strategic planning across the whole portfolio. So we'll be hearing from Matthew here in a second. So welcome, Matthew, to today's session. I'm also happy to welcome Dominique to the stage here virtually. Dominique est technologue en architecture pendant 20 ans déjà. Elle travaille dans le domaine des biens immobiliers. Elle travaille avec le système de gestion RPIC déjà pour 10 ans. Elle travaillait avant son emploi ici avec ESTC. Elle travaillait pour Pêche et Océan. She has quite a varied background in terms of her experience that touches on a variety of aspects with respect to the facilities management real property side that I think gives her some unique insight on the buildings, but also the interaction of the people within the buildings. So be anxious to hear from Dominique in a little bit. So welcome. Obviously, I'm Wayne, and Michael did an excellent job introducing me. And we did talk a little bit about the order of presentation today, but I'll just highlight that. I'll have a quick introduction here, and then Matthew will dive right into the data-driven side on House of Commons. Dominique will talk a bit about the retour au travail and really the physical distancing side that's important in what we're doing. I'll come back. I'll have a couple more polls to talk about. We'll chat a little bit about phased return to work, and then we'll look forward to the question period where we can open it up to everybody and have some good interaction. So we want to leave a lot of time for that, and then we'll invite Michael back to the center stage where he can, of course, wrap up and talk about some of the upcoming events and some of the things that we're going to be doing. So with that, I think that one of the things that I wanted to talk about is what are we trying to accomplish today? And I'm not going to go through this, but we understand the concept that there's plans that need to be put into place. We understand the importance of the health and well-being of the employees. So for today's session, what we're hoping to do is obviously share some knowledge. We're hoping to stimulate some conversation. Everybody's in this same situation with respect to return to work. So we think it's important to share experiences as well as the knowledge of where we're going to go over these next months and possibly years with respect to the phases on the return to work. So, one of the things that there's a lot of surveys out there right now, and we're seeing a lot of different data come back, and there's some examples here on screen. But I thought what we could do while we're together is I'm going to share a survey, a poll with you guys right now that I'm hoping will echo some of the things that we're seeing out there on the market. And so the poll that we want to ask is a very straightforward one, which is, have you received any sort of surveys from your employer at this point? So I'm curious to see the results here, because I've talked to some departments who have been asking their employees how they feel about working from home, how they feel about coming back to the office. And it's been some interesting results that I think will help influence what we're going to be doing in terms of the return to work. So we'll give this another 30 seconds and hope everybody can have a chance to answer that. And we'll of course be sharing these results as we go along and see what that is. I know that while we're doing that, I've chatted with a few departments, and they've actually had really good results on the polling, to the point of, like 75% of people that have polled actually responded, which for any sort of poll, that's actually quite good. We're almost there. I'm going to give it another 5 seconds here, and so if you're unsure, throw your answer in right away, and we'll have a quick look at the results. All right, so just sharing the results here real quick. So the good news is the higher percentage of you are saying that you've been asked. And I think that that's a positive sign, because realistically, it's going to take everybody in this to actually drive some good results on the return to work. So great, thanks for doing that. Now, actually, what I'd like to do is ask one other quick poll before we go a little bit further. And I'm going to launch this one, which I think is a pretty straightforward one. And it ties into the last one that we just asked. Do you actually feel that the survey that you've either responded to, or do you think that a survey would help in the whole return to work side of things? How strongly do you guys feel about surveys informing the organization on how we're going to get back to work, or more specifically, get back to the workplace? I guess we could argue, right, Michael, that we're all at work, we're just not at our usual place of work. Bit of a misnomer there. So we'll let this one run for another 10 seconds. And I'm seeing, I get to see the results as they come in, so there's a pretty large skew here on what everybody thinks. And this will be great information for RPIC to share at a senior leadership level, because I think you'll see the results here in a second are pretty resounding. So I'm going to wrap this one up here and then share the results. So you can see everybody agrees, if they're asked, that it will contribute to a more positive return to work strategy. So thank you for participating in that. I think that that's not surprising, and I think that that's going to be a good one for the organizations to follow up on. Okay, so with that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pass this over to Matthew here in a second, but I'll lay the groundwork for really the conversation today, which is, we don't know where we're going to end up with respect to the return to the workplace. And there's going to be very much a lot of shifting perspectives, a lot of things that are going to go up and down in terms of, we may start with 20% return and then all of a sudden pull back for certain reasons. So there'll be some up and down on that. The key there is going to be the ongoing assessment of what's going on. And again, the basis for today is around the data. So that third point, which is really what you'll see echoed in the next couple of presentations, is how do we build on the data that we have and continue to use that data in the return to the workplace to make informed decisions on everything that's going to be happening. So with that, what I'll do is pass the baton over to Matthew and let him lead the charge here.
Very good. Thank you, Wayne. As you rightly noted, I am Matthew Glynn. I was born and raised here in Ottawa, though moved overseas for over a decade, only to return about 4 years ago for the opportunity to work at the House of Commons. Time in the UK was incredible, professionally and personally. What started as a little jolly as a junior interior designer soon grew into something far more serious. Following the wake of the economy tanking, my career skyrocketed and became eventually the director of design and project management for a London-based corporate commercial firm. A lot of hard work, but plenty of fun. As I returned, I sort of felt like Marty McFly stepping out of the DeLorean, seeing what Europe and most of Southeast Asia was up to in the office world. I was quite saddened to see that cubicles still had their place here, and 50 shades of beige, and realized we had some catching up to do. I started at the house rather, as an interior designer, and moved up to management of interior design. And had an opportunity to build on the policy of our modern office, and the new space standards, which we colloquially call at work, and broadened into piloting our first steps of our occupancy sensors, which started a few years back. About a year or so ago, opportunity came up to move within our FM team, working on capital planning, workplace strategies, and then really helping them delve into these initiatives on intelligent buildings. All very exciting stuff. And more recently, I've been heading up the charge on a return to work initiative, developing tools and guidelines to help provide direction on the future state for the House, both the MPs and the administration alike. So, never let a good crisis go to waste. This is an often misdirected quote. I've seen it come up in quite a few presentations over the past couple of months, but well fitted to the situation. Moreover, to the innovative solutions that are developed to maintain momentum and keep businesses operational. Undoubtedly, you've all come up with new ways of managing in these troubled times. In some cases, I suspect you're in a place where you never really expected to be, say 4 months ago. Obviously, back in March, pandemic was declared, and in response, the House of Commons swiftly locked down the precinct. We pivoted very quickly from a rather traditional institution to a very remote and agile working model, which is a truly momentous transition to go through. What was initially planned, obviously, as a kind of 3-week hiatus, became a far longer stretch of time, and affected the majority of our staff even to this day. Push to the next slide. Yeah, good. So return to work, workplace resumption, business resumption. They're all several names, but all with the same goal, returning to what we knew as normal. How we define this new era is a whole other discussion. It's a piece that we're sitting on as well with our planning groups to see what are the new standards that we're going to start developing our new spaces towards. Now, as a group, we've been planning since April, listening to dozens of webinars, podcasts, several white papers, guidelines, checklists. I mean, there's no shortage of information out there, and all really good stuff. And as part of that, we've created our own guidance notes and developed a series of calculators, leveraging the data we had on hand to help inform the decision-making process. It's one thing to say, yes, we can open, but how's it going to work? So some of the key points for consideration: how many people can we get back safely? Talking about both physical and mental well-being. How do we manage the requests to open space? And equally, how do we monitor their space once it's open? Just in a little bit of an aside, House of Commons is basically a very big city. For those of you who may not be familiar, we have various spaces and services, from postal to legal, custodial, catering, multimedia to security, as well as your traditional functions such as IT, finance, HR. So it is quite a really large organization. So transition to the next one, please. So how many people can we get back safely? So developing density modeling. So it's not necessarily just looking at one floor in isolation, but what does the rest of the building have to do with it? Pulling in head counts and usable area from the databases we had to hand to develop these really simple density modeling tools. I started initially a little snapshot here from just a simple Excel table as a starting point, and then layering in some simple illustrated graphics to help create visualizations for the guidelines. Thus highlighting kind of our maximum return scenario plan, respecting current physical distancing, and then setting projections to test this building capacity as we go forward. Big part of that, limiting factors. Can go to the next slide, please. Now, circulation, amenity use, sanitization, cleaning abilities, associated product availability, obviously very weary supply chains at the moment with respect to wipes, gloves, PPE, that, you know, all that sort of stuff. But of these limiting factors, the biggest I think we see in most cases is vertical transportation as a real pinch point. And working in combination with the density planning tool we created, we developed calculators to estimate queue times for lifts, as well as the average kind of arrival times and travel time, distribution of people as we go through kind of blocks of time in the morning and the afternoon. So the morning runs, afternoon runs, and evening runs, you see a little kind of graphic on the side of the screen there. That's just an example of one of the scenarios we ran. And you can see, you know, some of this time is upwards of 40 minutes, which in many cases is just not possible. Now, interfloor travel through stairs is strongly encouraged, but in quite a few of our properties, it's just not possible. The stairs don't kind of decant or exit into main lobbies, and they're essentially designed for egress only. So there are going to be some challenges within this point. And next slide. Right. So as we kind of plan for reopening is managing these requests. Obviously going back to the fact that we are very much like a large city. So being able to track all the requests that come in is something that needs to be managed between the several partners that we work with. So again, not super high tech, but working out a spreadsheet that's hosted on a SharePoint type platform with multiple offerings, making sure the prime service areas are involved between HR, finance, facilities, and ops teams. So we've got set workflows that are established from day one. We can understand, all right, where are we going and how is this, you know, being put in place. That being said, you know, we have been looking at the ability to use asset management software to generate tickets and that sort of thing for varying teams to action and monitor. But we're a little ways away from that yet and getting all parties to get on board. As you can imagine, each have our own way of doing things and trying to pull us all back together is a main goal. That being said, when you look at the office itself, we're not anticipating significant changes when we start to return. We'd rather see limitations on space use, closing out some of the collab spaces, smaller meeting rooms, over buying new product or moving things around. Equally, here's where we're starting to use data that we have to hand to arrive at fixed return percentages. So looking at, for the bulk of the administration right now, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10-15% mark is kind of what our target is. The rest will continue to work from home or remotely. And then as restrictions relax a little, we'll start to see these numbers start to grow. So we're looking at really supporting kind of transparency across the teams, clear communication, and a single workflow, single point workflow, rather than what had happened in the past. You get different groups running in different directions. It's just not efficient. Okay, so look at pre-pandemic, as I mentioned earlier, we had deployed a number of sensors, occupancy sensors throughout our portfolio, and mainly they were used initially to test out new fit up space as well as targeting some of the upcoming spaces and get a real better appreciation for the overall usage of these spaces. And that's starting to shift a little bit. Interestingly, the average occupancy kind of pre-pandemic for some of our floor plates was around the 40-50% range, which meant that the supporting meeting rooms and collaboration spaces were all being, you know, very well used. Looking forward, reduction in these supporting spaces means a shift in the dynamic of the office itself, which will help to support the reduced headcount, albeit for the time being. We're not looking for a permanent shift here. Presently, we're looking at redistributing some of these sensors away from the desk level and shifting to cover more meeting and collab spaces across the portfolio. Initially, this will help to aid and monitor compliance for the non-use spaces. And then we'll gradually shift to ensure safety as they start to reopen, starting to fix on density tracking. Some additional data sets that we're looking to draw within is a combination of data sets from wireless access points or Wi-Fi routers, understanding who's pulling off of them on a specific floor plate at a given time helps us to establish a bit more detail around density. And then is equally access control data. So something as easy as bridging into our corporate security office and saying, right, we need to see the logs for set periods of time. Ideally, you know, real-time data would be good, but I think there'll be a slight lag. But all of this, it kind of helps to kind of monitor the density modeling that we're creating. So next slide here, kind of summary of approach. As mentioned, we are a small city, and we've been really collaborating quite a lot with several service areas and partners, specifically HR and comms at the moment, relying on occupational data as well as distribution of information to all areas. You mentioned key touching on surveys, and a piece that we're in the process of developing to gather these insights from people. Not only on their appetite to come back, but also what their expectation is. Now, moving ahead, working within real property itself, we've been drawing on ARC and ID for various levels of detail around the workplace itself, sourcing plans and developing initial counts and modeling from a whole host of different data platforms. And though we have other service areas to include and consider as well, and we're starting to reach out with them. I mentioned security at one point, so CSO, we've got our building management groups, tenant services or operations. Within HR, you have your health and safety and your labor relations groups. As standard, within digital services, your IT and multimedia groups, as well as corporate comms. And there's really a level of information that travels between PSPC and our own crisis management and incident management groups or teams that are kind of representation of each of the service areas. And then obviously our service partners help to influence what the requests are that come in. And this is, as you mentioned rightly, very much a cohesive event. We've never gone through something like this large before in this magnitude, and many hands make for light work. Working in collaboration or independence is going to be our key strength here. And this approach really looks at clear and defined flow of information, so structured and streamlined communications to all, as well as directions, direct consultation with the different groups and service partners, giving a broader understanding of the situation and their needs, unified and informed guidance as well. So ensuring that the health and safety environment is set for all in mind. Next steps. If you don't have a plan, you better get planning, because it's critical. You can't never waste any time spent planning and going through how you plan to return. And as Wayne rightly mentioned, there are some key points to consider. Looking at, build up a broad outline of what some of these goals are, and developing your lists of the data that you have, and identify what's missing and how can we get it. Break apart the environment into simple stages or steps, looking at the building, floor plate, the people as a suggestion. And most importantly, seek out service partners to collaborate with. As I mentioned, we've tied into our IT sector and into our corporate security, as well as communications groups and HR, to really make sure that we've got a balanced approach to space. I've included a couple of links here, and I know that I presume the deck is going to be provided later. But these are a couple of things that I found helpful when I'm trying to I ended up building the calculators in Excel myself. But the lift travel time formulas was a white paper somebody had created. It looked like it was a response to a thesis. It was very helpful. And then queuing theory, there's tons of stuff out there. One web link that I found was quite useful, as well as a simple YouTube video that helps kind of explain some of the basic principles so you can create your own. That's it for me. Ta-da! Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Matthew. It's one of those where I'm sure they're all applauding right now, and you just can't hear them. But there's Michael's applauding visually for you, so that's good. Okay, thank you, Matthew.
Can I take a bow?
Yeah, take a bow. Or more specifically, you can sidle up to the bar behind you now and grab a drink. You've earned it, as they say, virtually. Virtually, of course. We never encourage real on that. Okay, I'm going to shift the spotlight now over to Dominique, and we'll put the spotlight video on Dominique to present, and I will do a few interjections here. Dominique is going to do an awesome job of presenting this here to us. RPIC has been looking for content to be presented in French, and so we're glad to have Dominique come in and do that for us. So I'll weigh in on a few points. And with that, Dominique, please take it away.
Bonjour, moi je travaille pour l'équipe d'ISDC, le retour, les solutions de travail en milieu du gouvernement. Et puis, nous, ce que nous avons fait, c'est que nous avons depuis 3 ans monté le système RPIC au niveau des gestions des espaces, ce qui fait qu'on a déjà un système qui gère les données, qui gère l'information dans le système RPIC. Et puis, oh, excuse-moi, je vais juste revenir en arrière, je vais expliquer cette diapositive. Donc, les données que nous avons en ce moment dans le système RPIC, on a plus de 580 dessins AutoCAD qui a été uploadé dans le système. Avec les dessins, on a réussi à assigner la capacité et les occupants à nos espaces. Donc, ce qui fait qu'on a été capable de calculer dans la phase de retour pour la première phase, on est capable de calculer vraiment facilement si on retourne à 30 de capacité, on est capable de calculer notre ratio très, très rapidement. Et ensuite, pour la phase 2, si on décide de rajouter un 40 d'employés, donc les calculs se font vraiment facilement. On a aussi les catégories, les types qui ont été assignés à nos espaces, ce qui veut dire qu'on est capable de savoir qu'est-ce qui est une station de travail, une salle de rencontre, une cuisine. Donc, les plans nous démontrent très bien où sont situés les différents espaces. Ensuite, associé à nos données qu'on a, on a aussi le département et les branches qui ont été assignées. Donc, on sait qui est assis où à chaque département dans les espaces. Sur tous les différents étages, dans tous les différents édifices à travers le Canada pour tous nos 580 dessins. Ensuite, on a aussi les employés qui ont été assignés à les espaces. Donc, on est capable de voir qui est assis où présentement sur nos espaces en ce moment et de voir les places vacantes et les places qui sont à capacité maximum. Donc, on va changer de diapositive.
Yeah, merci Dominique. It's a great example of, the concept of what we're talking about here today is about the reuse of the data and how the data can inform. So it's a great background on the extent of data that ESDC are looking to leverage in this whole return to work.
Donc, merci. Quelques directives qui ont été apportées par SPAC. Et c'est des directives qui sont à suivre, qu'on a le plus possible utilisées. Il y en a quelques-unes que je vous présente en ce moment. Les postes de travail le long des corridors principaux à fort trafic peuvent être inutilisables si la distance de moins de 2 mètres n'est pas respectée. Les postes de travail dans les couloirs sans issue et les couloirs secondaires peuvent être utilisés en tant que distance physique de 2 mètres et peuvent être respectés et que des changements de comportement peuvent être mis en œuvre pour un passage sûr dans ces couloirs. Il y a aussi ensuite la directive que les couloirs composés de casiers et d'ascenseurs doivent avoir au moins une entrée et une sortie pour assurer la distance physique de 2 mètres. Et dans les zones de collaboration, il est recommandé que les espaces de travail ne respectant pas la distance physique de 2 mètres soient inutilisables. Donc, tout le monde a des données, donc on essaie de se fier à nos données le plus possible.
Right. So again, the idea is that, as Michael mentioned at the beginning of the session today, that there was some PSPC had published some data, and these are again guidelines that PSPC had published with respect to the space. And so collectively, there's a lot of data and policies and guidelines that are out there that can be reused. And we'll see here in a second how Dominique and her team have applied the data that they have along with the guidelines to really kind of make the informed decisions going forward.
Donc, cette diapositive, ça démontre un exemple de plan de Archibus de qu'est-ce que ça représente quand on voit nos données sur un étage en particulier. On peut différencier, on peut voir la différence entre les stations de travail versus les bureaux fermés et ensuite les salles de réunion, les cuisines et les couloirs. Donc, on peut aussi voir dans les données qu'il y a juste en haut à côté, on peut voir qu'on a nos capacités et nos taux d'occupants. Donc, ça, c'est un exemple de données qu'on veut utiliser qu'on utilisait d'une certaine façon avant la pandémie, mais maintenant, on va utiliser nos mêmes données mais on va les considérer dans un autre angle différent.
Exactly. So again, a great example of the idea that, you know, when we talk about pre-pandemic, the data and the occupancy was driven a certain way where ESCC were looking to maximize utilization in their assigned seating. Now, as we progress into kind of that first phase of the return to the workplace, we're taking the same data and applying a different lens to that to see how we can use that.
Donc, sur cette page de la présentation, je vais expliquer l'option qu'on a utilisée dans RPIC. C'est une option où on peut assigner des groupes, on peut assigner des espaces à une équipe. Ce qui fait qu'on a développé 3 sortes d'équipes. On a développé une équipe vert, jaune et rouge. La vert, ça va signifier que l'espace va être assigné à une personne pour le retour au travail pour la phase 1. Le jaune, c'est que ça va être peut-être utilisable, tout dépendant des directives et les distances de 2 mètres à respecter. Et le rouge, qui est assigné sur l'espace, ça veut carrément simplement dire que cet espace ne va pas être utilisé du tout pour le retour au travail.
So a great example of, again, taking data and leveraging a tool in a very innovative way. So the tool that Dominic is talking about is really meant to group people traditionally. So if you have a work team and you kind of collaborate together, but now it's being used in this way to add a layer of information to the existing data to differentiate a space that is usable based on the guidelines that PSPC provided. And Dominique will dive a little bit deeper on how that applies.
Donc, le plan de distanciation, une fois assigné avec les 3 différentes équipes, donne ce résultat-là à l'écran. Donc, en utilisant les mêmes données qu'on avait auparavant sur le plan d'étage, nous avons vu plus tôt, nous sommes maintenant en mesure de redéfinir les postes de travail comme étant sûrs à être utilisés pour le retour au travail dans la phase de retour 1, en suivant toujours les lignes directives que nous avons appliquées de SPAC. Et tout ça se fait sans avoir à reconfigurer les espaces de travail, les postes de travail actuels des planchers.
Right. So again, the idea now is just taking a different lens and looking at the same data. You can see from the visual representation here, the idea of now where there are safe spaces that they can start looking at bringing people back in for that first phase.
Donc, une fois que le système et les équipes sont assignées, à nos espaces, nous pouvons imprimer en format PDF, exporter nos données en format PDF qui va nous donner un rapport avec une légende sur le côté de quelles sont les places assignées, utilisables et non utilisables pour le retour au travail. Et on a aussi les symboles qui vont être mis sur les plans, toujours en respectant les directives de SPAC. Donc, ces flèches et ces symboles-là sont assignés pour démontrer clairement quels sont les sens que les employés doivent circuler de façon sécuritaire à respecter toujours le mètre de 2 mètres de distance.
So again, taking the reimagined layout, if you will, with respect to the distancing, and now ESCC can add additional layers on and communicate back out to the employees that are returning different protocols. Essentially what they're driving out is a good communication plan and just building that trust with the employees that they are actually returning to a work environment that is ultimately safe.
Voici la dernière diapositive, ce qui veut dire qu'on a différentes informations aussi qu'on est capable de lire, toujours avec nos données sur les espaces. Donc, on va être capable de voir les branches. On peut être capable de voir aussi le type d'espace qu'on a d'assigner à cet espace-là. On est aussi capable d'assigner le nom d'une personne et de voir aussi l'équipe qui a été assignée cette personne-là pour le retour au travail dans la phase 1. On veut juste prendre note aussi que le poste qui est assigné à une personne avant la pandémie n'est pas nécessairement la personne qui va être assise encore à ce même poste-là de travail quand il va y avoir le retour au travail au bureau dans les prochaines phases à suivre. Aussi, j'aimerais aussi mentionner que c'est certain que nous n'avons pas toutes les questions, les réponses à nos questions pour la journée 1 du retour au travail, mais nous sommes toujours en mesure de changer les données facilement, puis c'est toujours un travail continuel qu'on va faire toujours en ajustement informé.
Well, merci, Dominique. It points out a couple of key things here, which is, first of all, that all the answers on day one are not going to be there. But by using the data in this fashion, they're going to be able to really monitor and keep track of what's going on and make the adjustments accordingly. In this particular slide, it talks to the idea that there's a great level of detail. And because currently ESDC are in an assigned seating model, the idea of people coming back into the office might mean that their seat assignment might change. So there's this idea that the data will help them manage that as part of their change management protocols on that. So, bon, merci beaucoup, Dominique. C'est parfait. I'm going to take the baton back here momentarily, and we'll kind of keep plowing through so we can get to some of your questions. So I'm going to just jump right back, and just to maybe wake everybody up, we're going to come back with another poll and see if we can get you guys thinking a little bit on something. So let's just get some polls going here and take a minute for poll number 4. So poll number 4 is actually a very straightforward question, one that has been asked on many surveys. But I'm curious to see for this audience what you guys are thinking about in terms of continuing to work from home, some flexibility to work from home as also work in the office as required, or who's had enough with the homeschooling and they're looking to make that return to the office a permanent one. So we're going to let this run for a quick 20 seconds more here as we get everybody to pop in a question. I think what we're seeing is a parallel to a lot of what the surveys out there are talking about with respect to a certain percentage of people who are hoping to continue working from home and a larger percentage of people who are looking for that flexibility of partially working from home as well as being able to go in and do some office collaboration, whatever that steady state might be. So I'm going to end the polling here and share that, share the results. If we went back to one of my earlier slides, you would probably see that that's pretty much on par with a lot of the surveys that have been out there, with a large percentage of people looking for the flexibility on that. So thank you for that. And again, we'll continue to share this information as we go through. So I just have a few quick slides to go through and talk about data in the context of returning to the workplace. And we've got this in 2 buckets here, and this is from a survey that Verdantix did of senior executives, and looking at what it is that is going to be crucial for the return to work. And if you look down the column of the workplace standards, you're going to see the same things that are echoed in Matthew and Dominique's presentation here today with respect to the reconfiguring of the workplace, readiness audits of the space itself, the cleaning, and of course the concepts of pre-screening. What really hasn't necessarily been talked about yet, because we haven't really jumped into the full-on return to work, is this idea of employee experience. A lot of conversation though happening around privacy of information related to health, There's the idea of remote workers and how are they coping with the new challenges that brings. And we saw that in both Matthew and Dominique's presentation about the communication side being so important. Letting them know about what's happening. We saw in the poll that we put out to you, the idea of how many people have received a survey from their organization. We saw in Matthew's presentation how communication is going to be key to the return to work. So these are things that are all driven out of data again, and how we use the data. This slide talks to the concepts of evolving where you have investments. And why there's 3 columns is the middle column obviously focuses on the data, but if we really think about policy and process that are at play today, and some that are coming out, new policies that are being put out, as again, Michael mentioned one that came out just recently, just today. But there's some that are around, like fixed asset review, the fit up standards. These are all policies and programs that have been, well thought out and well applied, but they all contain data is really the point. And if you're not unsure of where to look for data in your return to work, these are just meant to be ideas around where you might find some useful data to help you navigate and plan that whole idea of returning to work. So, it's not an all-encompassing list here, but what we're seeing more and more is some collaboration across different groups within a department to basically make the return to work more effective. And I think in one of the earlier presentations, somebody had mentioned about making lighter work by having a collaborative effort. And that's what this is really highlighting. The technology piece is for some, like when you look at Dominique's presentation on ESDC, even for House of Commons and the various pieces of technology that they have, they're leveraging that to bring the data together, to bring the groups together and be able to analyze and monitor in a more effective way. So again, carrying through here to a final couple of slides, it's a phased approach. I don't think that that's something that you haven't heard before. It's something that's being planned on an ongoing basis. What we're seeing though is how you prioritize, and what we account for when we talk to clients and we see what their plans are is where they can have the quick wins. And so the focus on kind of immediate return to work strategies tend to be around this concept of physical distancing, to ideas of reservations, to the concepts of health and safety as it might relate to training prior to employees coming back into the office, and offering up protocols or training and validating that people who are coming into the office have actually been through those types of exercises. And then as you return to work, to the workplace, and you evolve towards that steady state, again, there's a number of pieces that come into play where Dominique mentioned about a seat assignment and a person maybe not being at that seat anymore, or perhaps sharing that seat on a schedule basis. So you start seeing pieces of the puzzle of the data and how it ties into workflow for managing moves or reservations or schedules, all the way through to the idea of sensors. Matthew mentioned about redeploying sensors that they have typically used for utilization. Well, they're going to use it for the same data, but they're going to apply it with a slightly different lens. So instead of trying to maximize the utilization in the space, they're going to use the sensors to inform and make sure that they're hitting a certain lower benchmark on that utilization. And even that sensor information can feed into ticketing and cleaning contracts, issuing automated notifications of spaces that are used. So it will be an evolving thing. The key here again is starting with some base data and then always monitoring and adjusting as you kind of go through that with the data elements. So a few other quick things here. You know, in our discussions with clients, both in the public sector and private sector, we're seeing a lot of things coming out with respect to, some would argue that they're wish lists, but some are saying that these are priorities for what they're looking to do. So when we kind of go through that, there's a number of things like the contactless desk reservation, check-ins with QR codes. So again, you're minimizing the contact. You know, the idea of when you're checking in for reservation, being able to validate that that space is actually ready. It's been cleaned and it's safe to use. Even the idea of reporting, so the communication, when you look at the bottom one here, the acknowledgements, what that's really telling us is that employees that are coming back into the office have answered the questionnaire and said, yes, I'm healthy and I don't have any symptoms. It's building that trust and that communication patterns to ensure a safe return to the office. And last but not least, you know, you can even implement the idea of the questions up front, right? Asking people when they're making a reservation, so how you're using your existing space data to build out a reservations tool, and then ask people before they show up whether or not they're how they're feeling. A little interesting article that I read recently, which will lead to our final poll before we kind of open up to some questions. There's various pictures here that we're looking at. One is a protest on the left side of the screen in Tel Aviv, where they put stickers down on the ground ahead of the protest. I think we saw some of this in Ottawa here, where they're painting circles on the grass to make sure people were staying within certain bounds of each other or away from each other. And then an image down here in Tokyo of a restaurant getting innovative on the using some, looks like some PVC tubes and some plastic. So I'm not recommending that we're going to be doing this in our workplace, but it was a good read to talk about how things are changing with respect to what our expectations are. So I think it's a good segue. We asked a question earlier to everybody around the concepts of whether you wanted to work from home or to go into a different work environment. So here's a poll now where you have to pick your top three, which are, you know, your most important topics to in terms of returning to work, and see what kind of response we get here on this poll. So they're pretty self-explanatory. Pick your top three, and then we'll see where we get with that. And then we're going to open it up to some questions. I see that there's some questions that have been coming in. Again, there's been polls that have been put out there with respect to the return to work. Certainly communication has been a big one. The idea of the trust in the organization that you're returning to work for, and that they're doing everything to ensure the safety of the individuals. All right, another 5 seconds on this poll, and we'll share the results. Almost everybody responded. All right, let's share that so we can get to some questions, and I'll share the results. So interesting, you know, the communication is a big one, and equally the distancing of the spaces are kind of neck and neck. The third one here seems to be this idea of being able to make a reservation and validate the cleaning of the space on that. So interestingly enough, the assigned seating isn't top of mind. So there's some interesting shifts in the patterns around that. So with that, let's turn this over to some questions here. I see that Abby and Shoshana have shared some questions with me, and we'll get to those right now. And some of these are going to be directed, so I'm going to turn the video spotlight off of myself, and maybe get the other panelists back into the mix. Okay, so cancel that. So you should see all the panelists. So let's start with, there was a question about the links that Matthew provided, and yes, 100% we'll make sure that those links are shared. They'll be shared obviously through the presentation, but we can also figure out a way to distribute a number of these. Question to Dominique, and it relates to this idea of the seat assignments. And the question is whether you're requesting that employees come in to remove their belongings from their current assigned workstations. So I'm going to guess you probably haven't quite got there yet, but has there been a discussion on that yet?
Okay, I was writing something down to her. I thought it was something that I could only share to her, but that's fine.
Yeah.
The thing that the PSPC have told us so far regarding the belongings on the items, it was not clear. It was not defined yet on how people will manage to get their stuff with them, and how their lockers will be accessible and stuff. So. But the only mention that they said that every time a workstation is available for somebody to sit there, it has to be clean and free of everything. So it is easier for people to clean with wipes and disinfect like everything. So they don't have any directive yet. I'm not aware at least, but so on how we'll get our stuff and work with our items. So.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that as you guys lay out the plan for phase one, there'll be that discussion, and certainly the priority is around clean surfaces, which assigned seating creates its own problems with respect to you know, being able to be decluttered and not have items on there. We're into the Q&A. So I know Michael has a couple of things to finish up with. I'm just watching the.
Can I ask for a question, Wayne? I don't have the feature to ask a question. There's.
Oh, that's why we didn't give it to you, Michael. We were trying to block you out, but we'll let you ask the question live.
All right. So nice to see that there's like tons of sources of information. Information can tell us, you know, where we're going to go, but there's lots of non-traditional sources of information. Matthew, you were touching on those. So when we go back to our departments, what are like maybe the top 3 sources of data we should be looking for? Who are our partners that we should be reaching out to? And then how do you actually use, how do you combine that data with your real property data?
That's a big question. Who wants to tackle that first? Matthew, you want to go?
That is big, yeah. No, pass. No, I think for us, having a channel to work through in terms of being able to loop different partners in, we're very fortunate to have an IMT, so an incident management team, and then the crisis management team is kind of your escalation point. So in order to, everybody's already at a table, so it's very easy then to coordinate and collaborate within. I think that was very important, just setting up the mandate and understanding the process, and then having the guidelines tailored to that. terms of research and non-traditional sources of pulling information, yeah, I mean, you're over inundated, to be honest. I think got to be cautious of is there's some misinformation that's kind of creeping in as well, where people are making recommendations and suggestions on elements that maybe aren't the right routines and aren't safe. Certain cleaning products and films that actually have nothing to do with COVID expressly. I mean, they're good for general hygiene, but are kind of creeping their way into kind of mainstream thought. I can't remember the rest of your question, sorry. It was too big.
But Michael, I think the point that you were making, I think, is where we can kind of start collaborating. And I'm not sure if you were leading the question back into the RPIC conversation, but I think that's where it lands with respect to how RPIC can kind of bring these conversations forward. So you're going to see, not to steal your thunder, but there's going to be a survey that's going to come out after the presentation. So I think it'll be key for people to actually respond and kind of say what they're looking for, what they're looking to lean on for this kind of audience and for these kinds of questions that are going to come up. So we're definitely at the top of the hour. I know there's a couple of points that have been brought up in the question, but I want to pass it to Michael to wrap up here. So for the questions that have been posed, we will circle back and we'll send those out to the general distribution, and we'll make sure that Dominic and Matthew and Michael will have a chance to look at the questions and respond to those in writing. So I'm going to pass it to Michael, but I'm going to thank very much Dominic and Matthew for taking the time out in their busy schedules to do this. That was fantastic. Well presented and great information. And with that, I'm going to let Michael take over and wrap up the session.
So take us home. So thank you. Great discussion. Great to see your insights from the organization. Wayne, thank you for moderating and bringing your expertise. Registrar Rosa, thanks for taking care of us. Tech support, e-learning solutions, Abby and Shoshana, thank you very much. Surveys and comms, Leslie and Robin, thank you very much. Participants, this is for you. Thank you very much. There is more to come. Our second session in the Pandemic and Corporate Real Estate series is going to be Asset Management, a Better Plan B, a topic about resilience, top of mind these days. The leader in that discussion is going to be none other than Monsieur Bernard Gaudreau, a founding member of the Institute of Asset Management and the CEO of Planifica. You'll recognize him from our Real Property National workshop. Expect to hear from us with a copy of this presentation by Tuesday, and this is just the start of the conversation. Expect to see a copy of the presentation up on our website by the 17th. Don't forget the survey when you leave the session. And I'm glad I was able to introduce you to my son, Simon, and my daughter, Audrey, who were going back and forth in the background. So welcome to my COVID workplace. See you soon. Thanks for being part of RPIC, and thanks to all the volunteers that make this happen. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Oui, merci.
Merci d'avoir... j'ai tout fait ça en anglais aussi. Oh, c'était rapide. OK. Merci, Dominique, d'avoir apporté un peu de français. Bien apprécié.
Oui.
And thanks to everyone. First one, I think we had north of 70, not quite as many as were registered. We'll work on... This is a new product, so we're working on it. But it's one of the best attendances we've had for if you compare it to our breakfast session. So there we go.
It was great. Everybody enjoy the weekends.
Yes.
I think
It's a long weekend before a week of holiday.
Yeah. Bon, merci. And thanks, guys. We'll talk soon.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Leslie, Shoshana, Abby, thanks for making it run smooth.
Yes, thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye now.